Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Deffinition, aka Mr. Marvel, and this is the channel where we explain it so you don't have to. Fans are still scratching their heads over the many events that happen in Avengers Endgame, so I thought I'd put together a video explaining everything you need to know about how the timeline and parallel universes in the film operate. Throughout this video, we'll be breaking down the things as they happen to give you a rough idea of how everything tied up by the finale and how Captain America was able to appear to Sam and Bucky at the end of the film, even though he was in an alternate timeline. Marvel mega fan Oren Bell has created an amazing interactive map that showcases the journey that the heroes went on in the movie in an easy to understand fashion, and if you'd like to follow along with this video, I'll leave it linked in the description below. This is full spoilers ahead, so if you're one of the two people that haven't seen Avengers Endgame yet and don't want anything ruined for yourself, then I highly recommend that you turn off now. With that out of the way, I just want to give a huge thank you for clicking this video. I hope you enjoy it. Now sit back, relax, and let's get into my timeline breakdown. So the movie opens 3 weeks after Thanos carried out the snap. The universe is devastated, but after the surviving Avengers track him down and Thor finally goes for the head, we pick up with them 5 years down the line in 2023, which is where things start to get a bit confusing. Due to the discovery of time travel, we start off with our heroes all in the same position at the Quantum Tunnel. They have split into groups all with their own objectives, and we initially follow Team A made up of Captain America, Iron Man, Ant-Man and Hulk. This group travels to the Battle of New York to retrieve 3 Infinity Stones and split off into their own smaller groups. This part of the film is set during 2012, and it's pretty much the moment that the entire Infinity Stone saga began, with Thanos appearing in the post-credit scene of the Avengers to kick everything off. However, things don't play out exactly as expected, and it's at this point that Loki takes the tesseract and travels off to Disney+, thus creating an alternate timeline. Hulk and Ant-Man gain the Time and Mind Stone, and together they travel back to 2023. However, Tony and Cap still need to secure the tesseract, and from here they travel to the 1970s to get it. We will call this group Team AA and Hulk and Ant-Man Team AB, but what happened to the timeline they just left? Well, that's the timeline Raleigh screwed up for the moment, and at this point Thanos would probably still get all of the stones and carry out the snap. In addition to this, the timeline that they've just left is slightly altered, with the stones missing, and though Tony managed to get some stuff off his chest, he still left the timeline very vulnerable. Team B, made up of War Machine, Nebula, Hawkeye and Black Widow, then travelled to 2014 during the events of Guardians of the Galaxy. This team then split into Team BA and Team BB, with Team BA made up of War Machine and Nebula securing the Power Stone from Morag. On Voromir, we join Team BB, and Black Widow sacrifices herself in order for Hawkeye to gain the Soul Stone, and he travels back to the present. Rhodey returns to 2023 with the Power Stone, but Nebula is kidnapped and replaced with evil Nebula, who's carrying out the bidding of Thanos. We will call this team, made up of Thanos' forces, Team BC. The timeline is really messed up now too, with the events of Guardians of the Galaxy not happening as Quill is unable to get the Power Stone, and the Gamora from this universe travels with Thanos to 2023 to fight the Avengers, which I'll get into later. Before we go into what happens to Team BC, let's go to Team C, made up of Rocket and Thor. They travel to Asgard in 2013 to retrieve the Reality Stone. Along the way, Thor takes Mjolnir, and together the two journey back to 2023. At this point, this timeline is pretty messed up, with Thor dying during the events of Thor the Dark World due to not having his hammer, and thus the convergence is able to be carried out by the Dark Elves, making them the rulers of the universe, and therefore Thanos cannot carry out the snap. We now go to Team BC, in which evil Nebula journeys back to 2023. She pulls through the rest of Team BC at this point, and they too arrive in the present. Now everyone is in 2023, which is where Tony carries out the snap that kills Thanos and his forces. Evil Nebula is murdered by Nebula from the present, and Gamora stays in the timeline. Tony dies at the end, and from here on out the stones pass over to Captain America, who along with Mjolnir travels back, placing them in their correct timelines. After jumping between alternate realities without creating new branch realities, catching up with Red Skull and replacing all of the stones in their original places, he finally returns to Peggy for that dance in 1950. In Timeline A that Team A travelled to, Cap interacted with Hydra, possibly interfering with the events of Winter Soldier, and Loki escaped. It is still likely that Thanos got all of the stones, but the snap would play out very differently, with the God of Mischief potentially not dying. In Timeline B that Team B travelled to, Gamora is absent. Therefore, Drax would have never met Quill and Rocket without Gamora being assaulted in the prison. The prison breakout would only be performed by Quill, Rocket and Groot. Rocket and Groot would leave Quill behind when he goes to get his cassette player, and thus Quill stays in jail and Ronan gets the Power Stone from him when he raids the prison. Also, Thanos is now absent from this timeline, greatly upsetting the political balance of the universe, and thus Ronan probably becomes the one that tries to get all of the Infinity Stones. In Timeline C, when the Reality Stone and Mjolnir are returned to this timeline, events play out the same way that they would have in Prime Reality. Thus, this reality has its own snap, its own time travel and its own branch timelines. These branches have their own branches on and on into infinite fractals. In Timeline AA, made up of Cap and Iron Man, when the Tesseract is returned to this, events play out the same way they would have in Prime Reality, and similar to Timeline C, this leads to infinite branching timelines. Captain America then grows old with Peggy Carter, and as he still has super soldier serum coursing through his veins, Cap outlives her and thus survives until 2023. Now, this is where the film gets slightly more confusing, with Sam seeing Captain America on the bench at the end. Since Cap doesn't return through the machine, we can conclude that he never returns to his own reality. The Cap sitting on the bench is not the Cap that we just saw travel back in time, rather the Cap on the bench is from another branch reality that had similar events play out, in which another Captain America travelled to this universe to live out the rest of his days with Peggy Carter. Peggy's husband was always alluded to but never properly shown, so we can guess that this was deliberately done by the character so that he would not interfere with events further and thus create multiple realities. This explains why when Cap goes to visit Peggy in the nursing home, that she says, "You look so young," as she would still class him as an older man. Whilst we may never see our Cap again, it's good to know that somewhere out there he's living the life he always wanted with Peggy, and this ending will definitely bring a tear to most people's eyes. Obviously, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the timeline, and hopefully this has cleared things up. If you're still stumped, make sure you comment below with your questions, and if you loved this video 3000, then please give it a thumbs up, as it took a lot of work and my notes on this are absolutely ridiculous, so I massively appreciate the like. Make sure you check out my breakdown of the X-Men film franchise timeline, which will be linked at the end. This is a channel for people who are super into superheroes, so if that's the kind of thing you like, hit subscribe. Thanks again for taking the time to watch this. I've been Deffinition, you've been the best, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.